This is yours.
Undoubtedly, Mr. Bien.
And Heart Sutra. All right, we'll start with the Heart Sutra. I prostrated the Arya Triple Gem. Thus lay here at one time the Bhagavan was dwelling on the massive Vajra mountains in Rajgira, together with a great community of monks and a great community of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that in the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should often like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition, factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristics. Unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition of factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element and so on, up to including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no distinction of ignorance, and so on, up to including no aging and death, no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. No wisdom, no attainment, so no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on the well perfection of wisdom, in their minds of wild obscuration without fear, passing beyond error to reach the end point of Nirvana. All also manifestly completely awakened to the unsurpassable, who is perfect complete enlightenment, he relies on the perfection of wisdom. Out of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of the great knowledge, the past mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, having only the truth, so it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata gati bharagati parasamgate bodhisattva. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan rose in that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara, and those surrounding in the entirety, along with the worlds, the gods, and human asuras and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. It's okay. It happens. No, for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations that I could make while listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations that I could make by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of the Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. Until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the highest assembly. By the accumulations that I gathered from listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. Queen Dechen, how are you? Queen Dechen. You've been demoted. Now you're only queen.
You mean she's no longer the emperor?
Sorry?
She's no longer the emperor. She's only a queen now.
Well, she was the mother queen. Now she's just a queen.
You're getting very naughty there.
The queen mother. The queen mother.
You back across the border.
Yeah. Anyway.
One of these days, I'll open the borders and I'll be back up.
All right. Okay. So let's start with chapter number 6. Before we start with chapter number 6, no, actually, let's start with that. So Geshe start off with speaking about compassion, which is not directly related to the chapter number 6. Of course, it is related. It is very much related, but it's not. The point that he came up with is not found within the first verse in the chapter or other things, but it's still an important point. So since he made that point, I just wanted maybe to add some more details. So let's look at what he said. So I put it in my class notes, and I will put it on the Dropbox tonight and also send it through to everyone. So he, first of all, he spoke about the second verse from the first chapter in Chandrakirti's supplement to the Middle Way. So just to give you some details about Chandrakirti's text. So it is called in Tibetan Ummalajukpa, and this term Ummalajukpa is translated in different ways. Since the term itself is a bit ambiguous in Tibetan, there are a variety of ways of translating it into English. So you often find about entering into the middle way. Now, at the beginning of, Nagarjuna composed a text that is called The Root of Wisdom, in which he gave an exposition of the philosophical view of the Madhyamikas, particularly Prasangika Madhyamika. Then came along Buddha Palita. And Buddha Palita explained the intention of Nagarjuna. After Buddha Palita came Vasubandhu. And Vasubandhu said, Buddha Palita got it wrong. He didn't get what Nagarjuna was saying. And he explained according to his own view what Nagarjuna was saying. And in this, he opened the way for the middle way autonomy school of thought, the Madhyamika Svatantrika. Right? So Vasubandhu said, Buddha Palita did not get it. He made mistakes. This is what Nagarjuna meant. After that, Chandrakirti came and said, actually, Vasubandhu got it wrong. Buddha Palita got it right. So he pointed faults in the views of, actually, I said Vasubandhu. I should have said Baba Viveka. Right, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Baba Viveka came after Buddha Palita. And he said that Buddha Palita got it wrong. And Baba Viveka was the one that opened the way to the Middle Way Autonomy School. Then Chandakiri came along and Chandakiri said, Bhaviveka got it wrong. Buddha Palita was spot on. Of course, Nagarjuna was spot on. So Chandakiri composed the supplement to the Middle Way, which is explaining Nagarjuna's text. Now, Nagarjuna explained the text. He spoke about wisdom. So in the middle of Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to Chandakiri's text, so you see there's a commentary over commentary over commentary. So Lama Tsongkhapa said that what Chandakiri did in the supplement to the Middle Way was taking Nagarjuna's text that spoke about wisdom, and Chandakiri applied it to the 10 Bodhisattva grounds. And therefore, he also supplemented it from the viewpoint of how Bodhisattvas progress along the stairs of the path. So he also spoke about the method side. So in that sense, he supplemented Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom of the Middle Way, and therefore it is called the supplement to the Middle Way. Anyway, so the text consists of 10 chapters. Each one of them is matched up with a perfection. So we have the 6 perfections, or more extensively, the 10 perfections. Each one of the perfections is paired up with a ground. So the text begins with just a general introduction. So Chandakiri pays homage to compassion to begin with. This is what Geshe-la says, quoted at the beginning of his session. So he said, love alone is seen as the seed of a conqueror's rich harvest, as water for development, and as ripening in a state of long enjoyment. Therefore, at the start, I praise compassion. So I thought of bringing it up in a session because you hear about this a lot, that compassion is important at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. And an analogy is given to compassion at the beginning. So compassion is like a seed at the beginning. And the meaning of that analogy is that compassion or love, as in the first line, it is the seed of bodhicitta. It is the root of bodhicitta, and therefore, in order to give rise to bodhicitta, compassion is important. Then in the middle, compassion is important because here it says that it is water for development, but sometimes it is also said that it is like a fertilizer. So once a bodhisattva gives rise to the mind of enlightenment and enter into the path of accumulation, it takes them 3 great countless eons in order to attain the state of Buddha. So awful a lot of time, a lot of hardship. So in order to keep developing, in order to nourish their mind and heart, they still need compassion. So this is like water and nourishment for the heart in order to keep on going. So in the middle, it is like water, and at the end, it is long enjoyment of harvest, or a bountiful harvest. And the meaning of that is, after attaining Buddhahood, enlightened activities that benefit others are enacted because of compassion. So as Geshe said today, when we attain the state of Buddha, we attain great qualities. But without compassion, Buddhas will not be acting for the sake of others. So we enjoy the harvest of the state of Buddhahood, somebody else's Buddhahood, because of compassion, they enact their enlightened activities for our sake. So therefore, compassion is important at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. So this is how Geshe-la started. Then he went on to verse 3 from the supplement. He says, and Chandakiri says in that verse, homage to that compassion for migrators who are powerless like a baka traveling in a well, through initially adhering to a self, an I, and then generating attachment for things, this is mine. So there is, I think, a long and complex explanation that needs to be given with respect to that. So here we, first of all, start to look at ignorance, initially adhering to a self, an I, and then generate an attachment for things, this is mine. So we start to look at ignorance, and particularly we start to look at a particular type of ignorance, which is called ignorance of the view of the perishing collection, or sometimes it's called the view of the transitory collection, which basically refers to a mistaken sense of self, of ourself. So I conceive of myself to be inherently existent. So I conceive I and mine to inherently exist. Now, what Chandakiri says in this verse, in verse number 3, it says, homage to compassion for sentient beings that are traveling in samsara because of ignorance of grasping at a self, because of the view of the perishing collection, which is, I think that we can also link it up with the way that great compassion is developed. So when we describe what compassion is, we say that it is the wish for sentient beings to be free from suffering, right? And often we speak of the three types of suffering. So we have suffering of suffering, suffering of change, and pervasive suffering of conditionality. And normally when we speak of the third type of suffering, pervasive suffering of conditionality, we say, for example, this body. This body is considered to be a body of suffering because it compounds the suffering in this life. It is the basis for so many experiences of suffering in this life. But also because of this body, we perform actions that result in suffering in future lives. So we get attached to the body. We develop attachment to other things because we want to sustain the body, provide the body, care for the body with a great sense of attachment. We spoke about the main hindrance to ethics of gathering virtuous actions as being attachment to the body, right? So because of that attachment to the body and the actions that we take motivated by the attachment that we have to the body, we also experience suffering in future lifetimes. But also our mind, you can say that because of our mind, which is also an example of the third type of suffering, the mind that we have now is pervasive suffering of conditionality. It conditions us for suffering in this life. And needless to say that it conditions us for suffering in future lives. So this whole process is describes as samsara, birth under the power of karma and afflictions. And afflictions begin with a notion of self, the view of the perishing collection. So this is what Shantideva mentions here when he speaks about how you generate compassion or homage to compassion. It says, homage to compassion for migrators who are powerless, like a bucket traveling in a well. So if you think of a bucket that is traveling in a well through a pulley mechanism, it goes up and goes down, it goes up and goes down. Sentient beings travel like a bucket in a well through initially adhering to a self, right? Grasping at a self, grasping at I and mine, and then generating attachment to things. This is mine. So Geshe-la mentioned those two verses. In the class notes, I also included some 6 features to the analogy, but I think that since we have so much material that Geshe-la covered today, I wanted to focus on what we find at the beginning of the 6th chapter. So I just put it in the class notes for those of you who are interested in looking at more details with respect to this 3rd verse in the 1st chapter of the supplement to the Middle Way. This is the significance of the analogy. So, chapter on patience. Before we begin with the 1st verse, I thought that it's good just to remind us of how we get to the 6th chapter. We said that the first 3 chapters are focusing on, may the precious body mind not yet born arise and grow. Developing the mind of enlightenment, it hasn't been developed. Then the following 3 chapters, chapter 4, 5, and 6, which means the chapter on conscientiousness, the chapter on introspection, and here the chapter on patience, are focusing on preventing bodhicitta from deteriorating. So we said that in the previous chapter, we said that in order to guard the training, you need to guard the mind. In order to guard the mind, you need mindfulness and alertness. But also, one thing that brings the destruction of the decline of bodhicitta is anger. Anger is a major factor for the decline of bodhicitta, because when we develop bodhicitta, we're focusing on all sentient beings with a sense of compassion, an impartial compassion to sentient beings. When anger arises, we exclude others in general from the sense of compassion. It's not that when anger arises, we necessarily think, I will not attain enlightenment for your sake, or in no way I will become Buddha for you, in no way I'm going to help you. But still, it undermines the power of bodhicitta. Not only it undermines the power of bodhicitta, also, as the first verse in the chapter says, so many roots of virtue that we have created through such a long effort, so much hardship is destroyed by anger. So therefore, the 6th chapter is the last chapter that in the section of may that bond may not decline, right, in the verse for bodhicitta. So in order then to start to look at anger and patience, I thought of looking at the definition of anger, and then looking at the description of patience, and then looking at verse number 1 that provides a lot of discussion. So let's look at the definition of anger. The definition of anger is taken from the text on mind and mental factors. We'll study that next year, probably. It is a text that was composed, as I remember, by a Tibetan scholar called Purbuchok, who was drawing from Vasubandhu, right? So now I got the name right. Vasubandhu and Asanga actually combines in his explanation both Vasubandhu's treasure of knowledge and Asanga's compendium of knowledge in presenting different mental factors. So anger belongs to the group of 6 root afflictions. Amongst the 51 mental factors that are found within the list of minds and mental factors, anger belongs to a group of 6 root afflictions. And it is glossed as malice towards sentient beings, suffering, and phenomena that are sources of suffering. So we can connect it with your, I think, question from the end of the session, the morning session. Since that, when you look at the definition of anger here, it includes malice. So can you have then anger that does not come with the intention to harm? I think that if you look at that from a strict definition point of view, it seems that if it's anger, it will necessarily be involved with the intention to harm. But then, how then do we distinguish in English between being angry and being upset and being down, being kind of, sorry? Frustrated and so forth. Or irritated.
Or fearful.
So, or?
Fearful.
Fearful. Well, I think that in the 8th verse, let's look at, yeah.
In English, we sort of put it all together in one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so so the nature of, so when we arrest the causes of anger, as Shantideva says, we look at the nature of the cause along with its disadvantages in verse number 7, right? So verse number 7 says, having found its fuel of mental unhappiness in the doing of what I do not wish for, and in the hindering of what I wish for, hatred develops and then destroys me. So hatred, by the way, so there is, I think that as Alan pointed out in the morning session, there are different words that we used in Tibetan. One of them is kondro. Kondro is normally translated as anger. Another word is shedang. Shedang is normally translated as hatred, although you can also use them interchangeably, dependent upon the context, how you would refer to them in English. But also sometimes you can say that they also carry that notion of aversion or a sense of aggression. Right? So we have a variety of words that we can work with in English, and also a variety of words that we can work with in Tibetan. So here Shantideva says that the cause of anger is mental unhappiness, which I think that is so interesting. Kind of, it gives us so much to work with, because often when I find myself in different stages along the day where I notice that there's that irritation happening in my mind or mental unhappiness, and kind of it reminds me, hopefully, kind of in many cases, it reminds me that the next stage would be anger.
So in that sense, like as you're pointing out, like in English, we would call all of that anger.
Yeah.
But this mental unhappiness that if I don't catch it, will become anger.
Yeah.
Seems to be a more manifest
Yeah.
anger.
Yeah, certainly. So anger is, according to this definition, is necessarily with the intention to harm. So then when we start to look at how do we address different issues or approach different issues, like sometimes, for example, you wonder, how do I deal with cases of injustice? How do I, you work a lot, you do a lot of environmental work, so I think that it's so hard to kind of not to be irritated, upset, really fiery about certain issues. And I think that you can distinguish between being upset about a situation, which means that your mind is unhappy because you see that there is certain injustice done, but it doesn't have to escalate into the intention to harm. There could be actually an intention to protect because of being upset.
So more a passion. So it's not the anger. Sometimes we call anger a passion, but a passion to do something which propels the sort of action you do, rather than that anger, which is not about harm.
Well,
I guess I'm also just thinking of like when we talk about anger destroying 100 eons of virtue, then like my understanding, the English kind of expression anger sort of encompasses just mere irritation.
Yeah.
So even how I get irritated if I'm risking, if any of those people at Bodhisattva's have got burning 1,000 eons of karma, and every time I get irritated, that's pretty scary. But
No, I got irritated a few times.
Anger is a red flag. It's a warning that something's not right.
Well, it is when your mind is becoming unhappy, when something that you feel is not right that was done. It's like you can say that it is a red flag or kind of a irritation when something that is not right. It could be that it is generally not right, but it could be that we're perceiving a situation in a distorted way. So I think that when we think of being irritated, unfortunately, I've been irritated even with my teachers sometimes. Sometimes when I go to Taiwan and spend, weeks on end with my teacher, I get, in certain situations, I get irritated, unfortunately. I wouldn't say that it escalates into anger, that I don't want to punch him or kind of, it doesn't come with the intention. Yeah, it doesn't come with the intention to harm, but, certainly you can say that in English, we would call that irritation, but in Tibetan, you can kind of say that it comes under the umbrella of a mind that is unhappy, unwell. It is not comfortable, right? So the word in Tibetan, midewa, encompasses all those states where kind of you feel uncomfortable. There's something that doesn't sit well with you. It hasn't escalated yet to the intention to harm, which what anger is involved with, but we can already recognize in certain situations that there is some set of upset, irritation, something that is unsettling there. And this is what we want to address. This is what Shantideva here speaks of, arresting the causes of anger. So often in English, I think that in general teachings, you hear about, you hear questions about the practice of patience, because I think that in English, as you pointed out, we sometimes conflate irritation with anger, or that we don't really distinguish between them. So for example, if someone is a harm-doer, someone has, creating a lot of damage to people, property, and so forth, how can you prevent that from happening without anger? Since that what motivates us to take action is anger. Most people think that unless you become angry, you wouldn't act in that situation. But here Shantideva says that the first step is to feel unhappy. There's that mental unhappiness that is happening.
It's also in English the opposite to patience is impatience, which again is not anger, it's defined here.
So the opposite to patience is impatience. In English. So,
But it's not the same.
Yeah, so we'll soon look at what patience is, and then maybe try to work it out, kind of try to add to that from the point of view of what patience is.
Yeah, another thought that's coming to my mind is like annoying. Like, oh,
annoying.
Yeah, it's so annoying.
So
Yeah.
annoying.
Oh my God, this is so annoying. Yeah.
Yeah, which is nothing like anger.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you could certainly equate it.
Yeah. I mean, and this is,
Different levels of anger, and different people portray it in totally different ways.
Mm.
You could have someone that's raging angry and go to sleep. You can have another person that's raging angry and doesn't really show it.
Hmm. So here we want to, we're looking at the chapter on patience. So Shantideva first of all explains the evolution of anger. It says it begins with a mind that is unhappy. But as I said, it's not only just unhappy. It is not well, it is not comfortable. There is a sense of displeasure that is happening. So there are various degrees to that, different shades to that mental unhappiness. And the thing is that we want to, when we look at chapter number 6, the chapter on patience, it gives us a lot to work with, because one thing that we want to do is to look at different occasions throughout the day, different scenarios throughout the day, and to make that mental note that this is what's happening at the moment. There is mental unhappiness. There is something that is unsettling. I don't feel comfortable in that situation. I find something to be displeasing. And then to remind ourselves that this is the cause of anger, that from that could arise the intention to harm. So what we address is that state of displeasure.
Is it because of anger, or is it this could lead to anger?
This could lead to anger. So then patience is a mind that is undisturbed. The opposite of patience, as you mentioned, is impatience, which means that it is a mind that is already disturbed. So it could be disturbed to different degrees. It could be disturbance in the sense that you're upset, you're unwell, you're not comfortable, there's a sense of displeasure. Or there could be an intense disturbance in a sense of you're already angry.
That's it, the other word aversion, we often say the mind of aversion as synonymous to anger, but it's not at all synonymous either. Because I can have an aversion to snakes, but I don't want to harm them.
I have aversions to avocados.
You have aversion to
And to mangoes.
Smashing avocados, right?
No, it hasn't escalated to that yet.
Smashed up.
Yeah, smashed double. Yeah. Some people like it.
Okay.
So, yeah. So anger is malice towards sentient beings, suffering and phenomena that are sources of suffering. That's the definition of anger for minds and mental factors. And its function is it acts as a support for not abiding in contact and for misconduct. I'm not sure what is not abiding in contact is. That's the function.
Is it?
Could be.
Avoidance.
Avoiding, maybe. Or not taking up, maybe not taking up positive actions. I don't know. It's not very clear. So then Tsongkhapa in the Lamrim Chemo, he glosses patience in the following way. So it says that, remember that we said that patience, there are 3 types of patience. Patience disregarding harm that was done to you, patience of accepting the suffering arising in the mind stream, and patience of being certain about the teachings and firmly maintaining belief in them. So Lama Tsongkhapa in the Lamrim Chemo also explains the incompatible factors with each one of those patients. So this regarding harm done to you, its incompatible factor is hostility. That's quite straightforward. Someone is harming you, you get angry with that person, hostility towards that person, incompatible with disregarding the harm that was done to you. Then the next one is accepting the suffering arising in your mind stream. So its incompatible factor is hostility and the loss of courage, which gives us starts to give us a broader understanding of what patience is. Because we can imagine different situations where we have suffering arising from within us. Like, for example, I think that we all have had experiences where we're sick or down, either physically weak, physically sick, or mentally weakened. There's something happening on our mind. It's so easy then to get irritated by small things just because there's that irritation or suffering that arises from within. So hostility is incompatible with willingly accepting suffering, but also loss of courage. Loss of courage, where you become completely deflated and think that there's nothing I can do to pull myself out of this situation, is also incompatible with patience of accepting suffering. Then, which means that patience of accepting suffering is also essentially about becoming courageous, developing a sense of fortitude in your mind, or resilience. That's another aspect of patience. And then he says that patience is being certain, the third type of patience, being certain about the teachings and firmly maintaining belief in them. It's incompatible with factors that disbelief and dislike. So,
But you may dislike it even if you believe it's true.
sorry?
You may dislike the fact even if you believe it's true. Say, it says it's incompatible with dislike,
Yeah.
but you may be certain about a teaching, you may believe it's true, but you may dislike it. I think this is more not just, I don't want to know that anger destroys the eons of merit. Dislike that fact, but they're not just I think it's more in that sense. That is.
Also dislike in a sense that maybe some portions of the teachings are not easy to put into practice. Like, for example, developing compassion towards a harm doer, developing a sense of forgiveness to a harm doer. So not only kind of you feel that you're incapable of doing that, kind of feel that actually it is not the right thing to do. I mean, I had that happening before, that kind of that sense of indignation, Of course I'm right, the person needs to be punished, or they need to get what they want, what they deserve, and so on and so forth. Maybe this is what the dislike is, thinking that I don't like this set of teachings because it doesn't fit my mood. Yeah, maybe it's this. No, maybe it's this. I'm not very sure, but we will look later on into how Shantideva explains that patience of being certain about the Dharma. So I think that essentially it's about developing conviction in the Dharma, but also, to do that, we need to rid yourself of disbelief, but maybe also dislike to the teachings or certain aspects of the teachings. So then, if you remember how Shantideva, how Gyatso Dhammarinchen in chapter number 5 gave, first of all, an overview of the 6 perfections, and he spoke about the nature of patience. So he spoke about it in a way that is similar, but he also said it is abiding in a natural mental state, right? So he said it is not disturbed by deeds of harm. It is not disturbed by suffering that arise in your continuum. It is strongly abiding in conviction in the Dhamma. But he also adds to that it is abiding in a natural mental state, which means that your mind is not disturbed. So this is what patience is. It is, in general, when we give the most succinct explanation of what patience is a mind that is not disturbed when others are harming you, when suffering arises in your continuum, or in conviction in the Dhamma. So when the mind is disturbed, at that point you're impatient, as you mentioned. So you can have, it seems, different types of disturbances. You can have the disturbance of anger, which is not only a mind that is disturbed, but also it has that intention to harm. But I think that also a mind that is unsettling to a certain degree, a mind that is unhappy, a mind that is not comfortable, this is already disturbed mind. So when Shantideva explains patience, quite a lot of, in many situations, he looks at that level of mental disturbance, he addresses that. Rather than looking directly at anger, he says, let's start with that mental disturbance and make sure that we deal with that. mental disturbance with respect to the arisal of suffering in your mind stream, mental disturbance when others are harming you. Any questions?
So the key is really to capture that moment when there's disturbance arising and to somehow create conditions to pacify before it turns into anger.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of to be mindful or to recognize those situations when the mind is unhappy, and then to practice patience or apply antidotes to the situations to dispel that. Yeah, this is, I think, that what we want to do in most cases, but it's really easier said than done, because there were quite a few situations where I was fully aware that what is happening now is mental unhappiness or discomfort. And I was aware of the fact that it could escalate into anger or hatred or being out of control. But and that recognition is something that keeps anger at bay to a certain degree. But it's hard to sometimes it's hard to apply an antidote to that discomfort, unhappiness, to the point in which it completely goes away. So at least we want to start reducing that level of displeasure or unhappiness with a certain situation, and reminding ourselves of the drawbacks of anger is crucial in order to do that. Because if we don't become mindful of the drawbacks of anger, we will go through the next step of turning that disturbed state of mind to an angry state of mind, allowing that escalation to occur.
Can I share with you that I was born taking convulsions from the baby up until I was 7? And if I got frightened or angry, I would take a convulsion, and I'd really pass right out, that blood blue in the mouth, and then Mum said that I would sleep hours after. And from my experience, I found the only way, anger's always been a problem. But the way that I found my anger has calmed is by getting sick and running high fevers and temperatures, and I've wondered if I've sort of burnt it up. Like I ran high-pitched fevers on and off for 12 weeks. I do all my own health too, my natural health. My appendix surgery, and I ran a fever for 20 days, didn't eat for 23 days, and lost 20 kilos. And now I'm quite calm.
That's good. It's good that you're well. I'm not sure that that's like the right medicine for anger, but it's good that it helped for you.
We couldn't hear that, Katsu.
I'll repeat that later.
But I think it's also issues within yourself, within your soul. I've been doing a lot of personal hard work for decades, and now I'm really, really reaping the fruit.
I was reading instructions this morning about practice that relies on sort of a level of physical exhaustion that does sort of then seem to go a bit beyond also conceptual mind. I guess it's not.
So you said that you read this morning about practices that kind of go beyond physical exhaustion.
Oh, they rely on some level of
Yeah.
physical exhaustion to go beyond course mind.
Yeah. Well, in the Chinese tradition,
Yeah.
in the Chinese tradition, you have different traditions even within Chinese Buddhism. The one that I've stayed for some time in the center in Taiwan with a nun that was practicing in the Sukhavati tradition, the Amitabha, based on the recitation of Amitabha mantra and so forth. And one of the practices that they do is, this is really incredible. I mean, I haven't done it, I haven't seen it in action, just kind of heard about it from her and others, is that they go on sessions that can go for days or weeks, where they march in circles reciting the mantra of Amitabha, but also they stamp heavily, Amitofo, Amitofo. Kind of, so it becomes like really like a trance kind of meditation. It sounds like what you described like you drive your body beyond exhaustion and you reach a certain mental state.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go back to the material because there's a lot that we need to cover. So, Shantideva says in verse 1, whatever wholesome deeds, such as generosity and making offerings to the Sugatas, have been amassed over thousands of eons, will be destroyed by anger. So, I've marked this section with blue, highlighted, thank you, because we contrast it with a verse that Geshe brought up today that is taken from Chandrakirti's text. He says, one moment of hating a conqueror's child destroys the virtues arising from giving and ethics accumulated for 100 eons. Thus, there can be no worse sin than impatience or negativity than impatience. So, Shantideva speaks about the destruction of roots of virtue accumulated over thousands of eons, and Chandrakirti speaks of hundreds of eons. So you might wonder, why are they different? What's the deal?
Very often it said it's not a literal.
Yeah, that's right.
And sometimes when it says like in the Tara praises a light of 100 moons, and they say actually it's thousands. In fact, universe. But also that it's not a definite time measure, that it's like in this, the merits that, the power of the merits that you accumulate, the strength of it.
Yeah.
Rather than a literal amount of time.
So I agree with you that it's not literal, and particularly because then when you start to look at different commentaries and how they explain it, you see that not only it becomes interpretive, but also some commentaries, it seems to be contradictory. So we have different explanation of why in some cases it's thousands, in some cases it's hundreds. I think that it's hard to come to a definite conclusion with respect to how it'd be for us, but I think that it's good to look at those commentaries just in order to get a sense of the negative aspects of impatience or anger. So I thought of drawing some points from Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo. It's explained by Geshe Tsopa. I think it was the Wisconsin Geshe Tsopa from the US.
I thought that
Yeah.
was probably SOE and not Z.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and in Tibetan it's the same.
Yeah, it's the same.
So you have Geshe Tsopa that composed this excellent commentary to the Lamrim Chenmo. It has those 5 massive volumes, great text. Then you have Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation of Chandrakirti's text. His explanation is called this Illumination of the Thought. Then I also looked at Khenpo Kumpel's, which presented opposing views, but also gave more information about some points that were quite useful. So I thought of presenting some of these points just in order to start thinking about it. I think that at this point in time, it would be hard to draw definite conclusions, but still starting to speak of some of the points, making some distinctions with respect to thousands and hundreds of eons and what type of virtue are we talking about. I think that gives some more context to verse number 1. So let's do it.
And there's also, the opposite to that by looking at this mantra or by saying this mantra or circumambulating this object or whatever, you purify eons of negative karma and will never be reborn in the lower realms. I said if you do 5 nunnats, you'll never be reborn in the lower realms. You purify that much. So in my mind, whether it's an exaggeration or not, it can balance itself out by doing other meritorious actions as purely as what you do anger. Get really angry, you can also purify it. So I mean, it seems to be the way, the Buddhist way. The Buddhists they have.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, it's hard to come up with kind of those hard facts, like doing 5 nunas and kind of you'd be sorted. But the same.
That's what, that's the lower level. Well, that's what I've heard said.
Yeah.
You do 5 million days, you want to be all in everywhere else, that's it. Purify that.
I think that probably some things that some things can be taken literally, some things can be interpretive, but also I think that we're different people. You know, it's like when something like that is being said to me, I kind of, my immediate reaction is like, I don't know, I find it hard to believe. For some people, for some other people, it works. So who to say who is right and who is wrong? You know, it's like, if it works for you, you know, if you have full trust in that and you think kind of, you have full devotion in doing 5 newness and that's what's going to
It's the same with
help you,
what
it works.
the Confessions of the 35 Buddhas.
Yeah.
This one purifies, you know, 40,000
Yeah,
years of
that's
this
right.
karma and
Yeah.
that karma, the other one.
I mean, from my side, I prefer to be on the safe side than the sorry side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all with you on that.
You might purify 40,000 eons of negativity for particular negativity, but that doesn't mean like if you're destroying 1,000 eons of virtue, that's something else entirely. You know, you're only purifying negativities, you're not accumulating that same amount of virtue.
Well, I think that, you know, for that we have good distinctions that are made sometimes with respect to what type of virtue we're actually talking about when we speak about the destruction of roots of virtue. And also when we do practices like purification and newness and so forth, how do we tick all the boxes right, so that doing a certain number of recitation, certain number of practices will actually create this massive amount of virtue. So
Point of concentration, perfect visualization, etc., etc.
yeah, I mean, it's hard for us to do it now, but still, I think that we can still look at how we improve our current practices. With more meditation on refuge, with kind of thinking of emptiness, trying to be more focused. So these things will gear up a practice to be more effective. So let's look at that. According to Geshe Zopa's commentary on the Lamrim Chenmo, Shantideva and Ashwagosha's discussion is about an ordinary person getting angry with a bodhisattva. In this case, 1,000 eons worth of roots of virtue will be destroyed. So that's one position.
So as the Gosha said in Zen, 50 verses per devotion, is it, or is it elsewhere?
I think that elsewhere, because Ashwagosha has a, yeah. Then, so one position is that when Shantideva speaks about 1,000 eons worth of accumulation of virtue that is being destroyed, it's about someone like us getting angry with a bodhisattva. That's one position. Another position is Chandrakirti refers to the bodhisattva on the path of accumulation getting angry with a prophesized bodhisattva. Now, prophesized bodhisattva is a bodhisattva that has reached at least the path of preparation. So when a bodhisattva reaches the path of preparation, it is said at some point they receive a prophecy about their own enlightenment. I mean, it's pretty unclear, because if you're on the path of accumulation, on the latter stage on the path of accumulation, it is definitely the case that you will at some point attain enlightenment. You will not go back, you will just continue to grow from strength to strength. But it says that when you get to the path of preparation, at some point, you get a prophecy with respect to your own enlightenment. So what the point is that here is that it seems that when Chandrakirti says that 100 eons of virtue is going to be destroyed by getting angry, it's a case of a bodhisattva that is on the path of accumulation, getting angry with a higher level bodhisattva. Which kind of, for us, it might be like, wait a minute, what do you mean bodhisattva getting angry? With another bodhisattva, how will that happen? So it can happen. It can happen that a bodhisattva of a lesser power will get angry with a bodhisattva of the higher power. So that's a distinction that Chandrakirti is making. Sorry?
I'll go with Chandrakirti.
Well, there's some more of that. So then there's a sutra of the play of Manjushri. It states that 100 eons of roots of virtues are destroyed. Now, Lama Tsongkhapa in the Illumination of the Thought says that it is not clear if in the sutra, if the person is getting angry, who is the person that is getting angry? Is the Bodhisattva getting angry? Or is it an ordinary being getting angry? Now, what is the object of your anger? Is it a Bodhisattva or is it not a Bodhisattva? The sutra is not very clear, but there is a statement of 100 eons of roots of virtues are destroyed. Anyway, we get another source. Then a non-prophesized Bodhisattva, which means a Bodhisattva on the path of accumulation, getting angry at a prophesized Bodhisattva on the path of preparation and up, the progression along the path will be postponed for however many moments of anger there are. So that speaks about...
It isn't for however many, it's not however many moments. Isn't it more than that? Isn't it? Yeah, good number of eons or something like that to the moments.
Yeah, probably you could say that, I don't know if there's like a fixed penalty price for that, but maybe you can say that if you got angry with the Bodhisattva for 1 minute, then 1 year is in postponed. 2 minutes, 2 years in postponed. No, I don't think that there is a chart, a chart of penalty rate, but I think that it makes sense that if you have just kind of a brief moment of anger, it's one thing. Whereas if you had like a raging day where kind of for a day you went totally mental about a Bodhisattva, the negativity in like going mental about a Bodhisattva being totally enraged for a whole day would be much graver than just 1 moment of anger. So the consequence of that would be a longer postponement of the attainment of the ground. I think that it makes sense. But also another reference that says that not only your attainment of the ground would be postponed, but also you've accumulated positive karma before. It should give rise to certain positive effects. The positive effects would be either reduced or they would be postponed. So there are different ways in which anger destroys roots of virtue. Geshe said today that anger renders roots of virtue incapable of producing their own effects. But what it means is not, it says that anger affects results, fruition. So it does not mean to say that if I get angry, I will never experience happiness. It means that, for example, if I created such an amazing virtuous action, I practiced ethics immaculately yesterday, but today I got angry with the Bodhisattva, then the destruction of the root of virtue that I've created could be either that rather than on the basis of attaining a precious human, on the basis of ethics, rather than attaining a precious human rebirth, I will attain just a human rebirth. Or it would be, I will not be born in a hellish state of existence, but I would be born as an animal. So that action of ethics had a potential of projecting a precious human rebirth, but because of anger, it got downgraded. Or it could be that if I practice generosity, an amazing amount of generosity that could have culminated in many resources, because of anger, it will be reduced to few resources. Rather than experiencing the result of that fruition soon or repeatedly, it will take a long time for that to happen. And also it wouldn't be repeated, or there would be longer gaps between the repetition of the result. So, sorry? So there are some more. So from the Illumination of the Thought, it says, when these sources speak of the destruction of roots of virtue accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years, the object of anger is necessarily a bodhisattva. So be careful. When you get angry, it says that we don't know who the object of anger is. Are they a bodhisattva? Are they not a bodhisattva? We often, because they annoy us, we assume that they're not bodhisattvas. but there's no pervasion here. So, the penalty rate could be 100 or 1,000 eons worth of accumulation of roots of virtue.
Donald Trump is not a bodhisattva.
Sorry?
Let's hope Donald Trump is not a bodhisattva.
Yeah, it's quite hard, isn't it?
He may
Donald
well
Trump. I don't know.
taking the measure of the
Well, you can say that, I don't know if it's a bodhisattva, but the actions it displays are not bodhisattva actions. Yeah. Yeah. So when a bodhisattva gets, so then it says, when a bodhisattva gets angry with a non-bodhisattva, they do not need to wear an armor. Now, what wearing an armor means, it's not very clear. I asked Geshe Jamin yesterday, what does it mean, wearing an armor? It says that it is not very clear, but when he thinks about it, he says that it seems that you still need to have this fierce protection from anger or impatience and so forth. So when a bodhisattva gets angry at an ordinary being, it could happen, but it is likely that it is seldom happening. It's not very often happening. So it's not that they have to protect themselves all the time to wear an armor.
The armor, though, is that to protect from the non-bodhisattva, or is that to be protection from the karma that they have developed?
It doesn't really specify what the, yeah, it doesn't specify what it is. It just says that they don't need to don an armor. That's it. So then it continues in saying, when a lesser bodhisattva who hasn't been prophesied gets angry with a higher bodhisattva who has been prophesied, it is indicated that if a bodhisattva merely generates an angry thought about a bodhisattva without any physical or verbal expression, which means just a thought, they're not acting upon it, they must bear the armor from the beginning for as many eons as the times that he has generated the thought. Also, his detention in hell will belong. I mean, this is not even speaking about acting upon it with physical and verbal action, just becoming angry at a bodhisattva. That's pretty harsh. Yeah, just a thought. Yeah, when a bodhisattva.
This is all to scare us, it's doing a good job.
Now, when anger is generated, it destroys roots of virtue, even if neither the object nor the base is bodhisattva. So far we spoke about getting angry at bodhisattvas, but don't think that if I'm getting angry at an ordinary being, such destructions of roots of virtue will not occur. Roots of virtues will be destroyed, even if the person that you're angry with is not a bodhisattva. Yeah.
So is the armor here talking about patience?
It's not very clear what the armor is. Could be patience. I'll try to find more information about wearing an armor, what it means. But anyway, it seems like we're out of time, but I wanted just to mention one more bit with respect to what roots of virtues are going to be destroyed. So Khenpo Kumpen says in the Nectar of Manjushrie's speech, so what we have now available online is only up until chapter number 5. Chapter number 6 onwards are not available online, so we have this in this book. So it says, there are 3 kinds of virtue. There is virtue tending to happiness in samsara, which means just you give something to another person without any, you practice generosity without any thought of it being virtue, without thinking that only depends upon that I want to be liberated, it depends upon that I want to reach the state of enlightenment. That type of virtue is virtue that is included within samsara. So that's one type of virtue. Sorry?
Being nice.
Being nice to another person. The second type of virtue is tending to liberation, which is informed by the wisdom of understanding the non-existence of self. So you perform a virtuous action with thinking of the person that I'm giving this thing to does not exist inherently. That is, you don't think that it depends upon that I want to attain the state of enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. You just give something to another person and thinking that I'm giving it to a non-inherently existent person. What I give is a non-inherently existent thing. I do not exist inherently. You don't qualify with bodhicitta, just with the view of emptiness. So that is virtue tending toward liberation. And then you have the virtue of the Mahayana, which is performed with both wisdom and skillful means, which means wisdom and bodhicitta. So we spoke about 3 types of virtue. So the roots of virtues that are destroyed here are the first type of virtue, that which is in samsara. So I wanted to mention that just before we go on a break, because it is likely that we will get angry with the break. In the break, destroy some more roots of virtue. Not the break, in the break. So it's important.
We'll love the break. We'll love the break.
Yeah. We should get along with
joking, Carson.
Give me a break.
We are. We're giving you a break, and you're giving us a break. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
It's like a holiday.
No, so this is what they said. It's important to dedicate the virtue and the merit that we accumulate with sealing them with emptiness, so that they will not be destroyed by anger. Now, it is often said that dedicating of virtues is safeguarding a virtue so that they cannot be destroyed by anger. But so that they will not be destroyed by anger, we need to make sure that they are dedicated together with thinking of the emptiness of inherent existence. So do it as much as you can. That's the last message for today. It's also a message to self.
Enjoy your break.
Thank you. Well, I don't have much of a break, but
Dedicate with them, you know.
yeah, yeah. All right. Be happy, everyone. Come back to us soon. 2 weeks.
Will do.
Right. May quickly become Guru Lord Buddha and lead every sentient being to his enlightened realm because of these merits. May the Supreme Jewel Bodhicitta, which is not arisen and rise and grow, that which is arisen never diminish but increase more and more. In this land encircled by snowy mountain, you are the source of all happiness and all powerful and
so please remain until samsara ends.
You uphold us at power, aware yourselves, and bountiful bearer of all, standing, preserving, spreading,
magnificence, victorious doctrine, must accomplish this magnificent grace, honoring the 3 jewels, protecting myself and others, your disciples, please, live long.
Thanks.
What do you mean we say we don't have another exam?
Oh, no.
Break?
I think that you don't have enough roots of virtue for being exempt from an exam.
Thank you. I'll leave for the break. Adios, amigos.
I guess it applies just the same to me. You know, I don't have enough roots of virtue to avoid setting an exam and then having to mark it.
You're just having a break.
This is where I feel sorry for myself.
Cheers.
All right, yeah, I know.